morning and welcome to the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur, a series of conversations with entrepreneurs and the investors that fund them on what it takes to make a viable, fundable company. This week we've got something a little bit different. I'm very pleased to have with us today Tom Moller, the owner of Satori wineries down in Gilroy. And Tom has done something different and gone from high-tech to the wine industry. And I'd like to take the opportunity to explore with him some of his background, what happened there, and the differences between what happens being an entrepreneur in high-tech versus something like winery, which I know many people would like to do. So, Tom, thank you for coming along. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background in the tech world first?
Sure. Well, electrical engineering background, and out of school I was kind of lucky in a way, found myself in the radio frequency area doing high power transistor design in the late 80s, and found my way to, well, I was working for a small company that went out of business actually, but just before it went out of business, Ericsson, which at the time was, I had never heard of it, big Swedish company. This was in late or 1989. And they really wanted these transistors from our little company because the only other place they could get them was Motorola, who would, at that time, they were the two really only companies heavily investing into cellular.
Okay.
And so when my little company went bankrupt suddenly, they approached me and a few others to work for them using their wafer fab in Sweden and developed these transistors, which we did starting in 1990, and it was remarkably successful. I mean, largely because, I mean, the timing couldn't have been better. So the volumes, you know, went from 1,000 a month to 100,000 to 400,000 a month in just a few short years, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time for that, and it was tremendous until the sort of the cellular or telecom crash in 2001, 2002. That's when it became a little less fun.
Okay.
And so keeping an eye out for other opportunities or other ideas was on my mind for sure.
Right.
Want me to just...
Well, no, let me ask you. 'Cause I know when we spoke before, you explained that getting into the wine business wasn't done as a strategy. This came about almost by accident. Can you explain a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, it was accident, or it was meant to be. I mean, part of me has a feeling for that because I ended up with a large property, which I got an amazing deal on, which I wasn't really looking for a large property. I just didn't want a real close neighbor because I'd been having problems with one of my neighbors. Anyhow, I ended up with this prune orchard, 20 acres, and didn't know what the heck to do with it. But after a while, a friend, the guy who drove me to the airport all the time, talked me into buying grapevines. So I planted a little section, and it went remarkably well. And then friends who I didn't even know made wine, but made wine passionately, came and talked me into buying winemaking equipment, got me into making wine. I expanded the vineyard. It was very helpful to have a steady paycheck at the time to do these sort of things.
So you were still working in the high-tech industry while you were doing this?
Right.
Okay.
And yeah, we were building a house, and what I said to myself was, boy, it would look beautiful to have a vineyard here. And so that was my justification at the time. But looking back, I mean, there must have been something more, because to fall into and end up with this vineyard that is actually large enough to start a winery, I mean, it's really, yeah, I guess lucky or something.
So how did it move from being what sounds like it was quite chance, and it was almost a hobby? You did a little bit more than most people do, so you started buying the wine-making equipment rather than just growing the vines and selling them on. Yeah. How did it progress from that to being, now it's a full-time job, isn't it?
Oh yeah, believe me. Yeah, I mean, it really started, I would say, for sure, with a love of the vineyard and kind of discovering this land. That it used to be a prune orchard, and a dying prune orchard, And it, you know, it was nice, but it wasn't beautiful. And the more time I spent in the vineyard, the more I started realizing, boy, I really like this. And then the making wine kind of came fairly easy. As I said, I had a lot of help with friends. It was very helpful. There's an old saying that it's easier to make a lot of wine than a little wine.
Okay.
The equipment really facilitates things. So again, having a steady paycheck, I went for it instead of doing what most hobbyists do and buy a small piece of equipment. I bought a big one.
Right.
And another, you know, all the stuff I bought it rather large. And I think that really helped me in the sense that the first vintages were pretty good, if I do say so. And it built my confidence and said, well, you know, maybe I could do this. And all along, never really thinking that this could be my full-time job.
Well, hang on a minute. You can get the equipment, and you know, being an RF engineer, you can get an oscilloscope and all that stuff, but it still doesn't enable you to design good parts. So how did you go from being someone who's never done winemaking before, get to be someone who was making? Did you go on courses? How did you learn about the vines and making the wine?
I had some friends who were, you know, had many years' experience, and they helped me a tremendous amount. And I read a lot. I took some classes at UC Davis, and I think I also kept it very simple. It's very easy. I mean, if you look at these catalogs they send you, you can get an additive for anything. You know, if you want better color, you can do that. If you want more tannins, I mean, it's ridiculous. You really would need to be a chemist, in my imagination, to know how to use any one of these catalogs. And I just stayed away from it all. Just keep it simple. Focus on the vineyard. I'm a big believer that if the fruit is really as good as you can make it, then leave it there, you know, and then just do the basic stuff.
Okay. So when did you start actually producing wine in saleable volume from the vineyard?
Well, saleable would also be legal.
Okay.
So you can't, as a home winemaker, you can make up to 200 gallons for your family, but you can't sell it legally.
Yep.
So I never got into that, but I was making that much before. So in 2006, we got bonded. So that was the first time I could do it legally. So that was our first vintage.
Okay. And how many cases or bottles did you produce at that time?
Did about 1,500. We've been steady at 1,500 cases. This last year, we jumped to about 1,850. And next year, I think we'll jump to around 2,500. Hope to level off. I mean, don't really want to put a top end at it, but I think the vineyard, the winery, everything can be sustainable, and we can live a comfortable life at around 3,000 cases a year. So we're working towards that. The vineyard can easily supply that, no problem at all. So we actually don't need all the vineyard we have to do 3,000 cases, but that's only 2 tons an acre.
Okay.
Which is very much on the light side.
All right. And the sort of things that you have to do in terms of looking after vines and producing wine, how does that compare to what you used to have to do in the high-tech industry? And what's the lifestyle change? What are the differences of pace?
Wow. Well, I guess there are some similarities. I mean, to some extent, there's certain things that are out of your control. You know, Mother Nature's going to do what Mother Nature's going to do, and wafer fabs are going to have issues. I think, I'm sure they'll always have issues, and the technology usually has issues. So you have that, but I mean, the joy of it, the beauty of it is you're in nature. You know, being in the vineyard it's a wonderful thing. It's hard work. It's physical. Not always like you know, where you're exhausted, but it can be pretty physical at times, which it feels good often. It can be very repetitive. That's one of the things that I can't say I love about the winery and wine growing business. Like we're pruning now, and you go out and you have to take it very seriously and do a good job. And so you'll do 2 or 3 plants and feeling good, and then you look and you realize, okay, I only have 9,997 to go. And it's a little the same doing wine. If you're doing 1,000 cases, that's, more than 10,000 bottles, and it goes pretty fast, but still after a while, it's, wow. So I can actually appreciate more the operator level, the folks who used to like build transistors which I only did as an engineer, but they do it in mass production. And
right.
I think I can understand and relate more to them, to those folks who sit at the table doing one thing over and over and over again, because there are many days when that's what I do.
Okay. Now, do you do all the stages from, you're obviously growing the grapes there, and you harvest the grapes. Do you do everything from that to putting it into the bottles on site, or do you send anything out?
No, everything is done on site.
Okay.
It's one way we sort of cheat, if that's a valid word, is we have a bottling truck that comes in. So they're just, I have the capability to bottle myself with my own equipment, but it's kind of hobbyistic, I would say. So we'll do very small runs, very special runs, but the bottling truck can come in and do 1,000 or 1,500 cases in a day.
Oh wow!
On a good day, where that would take me a month.
Right.
With a crew.
Right.
So.
Okay, so all the pressing, the storage, the aging, you do that. That's all on site.
It's all on site.
Okay.
And it's mostly just me. I get occasional help. Around harvest, of course, we get lots of help, lots of volunteers for picking and crushing and pressing. But after that, it sort of slows down, and mostly it's just me, and we do everything gravity. So we have pumps, but we only use them at bottling and at press.
Okay.
We don't use any pumps other than that, and it's nice, You kind of, okay, this week I'm going to do this, and like I said, it can be repetitive, but you'll spend all week or maybe 10 days just racking the wine, and
right.
One after the other. But of course, you sample regularly for quality, and so
there are benefits to it.
There's benefits, yeah. That's also a little different than high tech, except for those maybe long lunches that happened occasionally.
Right. Okay. Now, I was down there fairly recently, and you're quite modest about it, but your wines have won a number of prizes, which sounds to me quite startling for a winery that's been going such a short period of time. Can you tell us a little bit about the wines that you produce?
Sure. Well, for a winery our size, we're a little, I wouldn't say unique, but a little unusual in that we have so many wines. We have, Petit Syrah, Cabernet, Merlot, Zinfandel, Syrah. We do Cab Franc, not as a standalone, but we use it for blending. We will eventually have it standalone. And then we do a few other blends as well. We have a Joyous blend, which is kind of a funny story. A friend of mine said, the next blend you do, you have to have it end with US, because all the big ones, Opus, and all the good big ones.
Right.
So do that. So we thought, okay, and another friend came up with Joyous.
Okay,
so
sounds
we came
good.
up with that. But I think, in my opinion, really, most of the work is done in the vineyard, and we have, the terroir down there is really wonderful. It gets very hot in the days and very cool at night. I wouldn't say it's average, but average is probably 45-degree shift in temperature in the summertime, and sometimes it's 50 degrees or more. So the grapes really love that. Also, there's almost always a big breeze that comes up for about an hour and a half every afternoon. Helps keep the bugs off, mildew down. So the grapes thrive in that, these style of grapes especially. Because of the high heat, we do a lot of thinning of the leaves right when they, at fruit set, when they're very young, and really expose them to the sun early on, which makes for very thick-skinned grapes, which enhances the tannins, the flavor, the color, really makes for big, bold wines.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I think that would be our, if we had a signature, I would say that that's it, that almost all our wines are pretty bold.
Okay. Okay.
Get a lot of comments on the Merlot, especially, like, wow, I've never had a Merlot like that. And it's because we really let those skins get thick.
Okay, I didn't realise that. I didn't know how important that was. Now, I'm going to take an example of one of these. This is the Merlot you're talking about. And in looking at it, you have the usual tasting notes that people have. But you've also got a suggested ritual. I'm just going to read this. It goes, okay, it's time to let go of every sense of limitations. With every sip of this violet flame, feel free to your heart. That's it. But no, you have to actually feel it. No kidding. Who comes up with this? Because that's great fun and something you don't often see on a bottle of wine.
And they're all original. Even vintage to vintage, they change.
Oh, okay.
That's a dear friend of ours named Aquarius.
Okay.
Formerly Jeff Hoff, but he's been Aquarius for a long time. And he just comes up, we'll sit around and goes, okay, we got a taste. And he also does the tasting notes.
Okay.
We just throw at him, you know, flavors and whatever we can come up with, and then he crafts it. And I don't know how he does it. I don't think I could do it if you put a gun to my head, but I love it. And it's very fun, you know. One of the things, I was listening to an Alan Watts tape on one of the radio stations, and he was talking about how food used to be very ritualistic. The saying of grace and big, used to be a big deal. And one of his comments was, about the only one really left nowadays is wine, where people get a little serious, we'll have a toast, and there's a little bit more ritual around wine than most food these days, or most eating. And so that was one of the reasons we came up with that and thought of that. Actually, it was Aquarius's idea again, but I'm sure he had that in mind.
It's very good. It's very different. It gives you a different perspective on what to do with the wine. The other thing is, I understand there's a dual meaning to the name. Can you explain a little bit about the name that you have for the wine as well?
Sure. I mean, Satori?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, early on we were trying to think of names, and I was meditating, I think, but my wife's name is Sandy, and I'm Tom, and our son is Riley. So just putting them together, Satori, and it sounded like it rang a bell, actually, but I didn't get it right off. So I went down and Googled it, and it was like, wow, because what it means, it's a Zen term for a moment of enlightenment, or a taste of enlightenment, was what Eckhart Tolle describes it as. And reading that, it was just sort of like, okay, well, that sounds really cool. And then, actually, that very same day, a couple hours later, I happened to be reading the Eckhart Tolle book, and right around page 76 or something, he talks about Satori and a taste of enlightenment. I thought, okay, right, I get it.
Okay.
That's the name, so that's where it came from.
So it's both a combination of Sandy's, yours, and Riley, your son's name, and a sense of enlightenment, or moment of enlightenment.
A moment, a brief glimpse.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Satori moment.
Okay.
So the
That's a great
tongue-in-cheek
name.
is, you know, drink a bunch of this wine and you'll have a Satori moment.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty good. Now, going back to drinking, you have won prizes on this. Can you talk a little about some of the prizes that you won for the wines?
Sure, yeah. Just this year we were very happy to get a double gold from the San Fran Chronicle competition, which, and we've gotten several other golds, and there's so many competitions that the ones we focus on are San Fran Chronicle and the Orange County and Cal State Fair. And of those, I guess we've gotten 10 or 12 awards, and I can't really tell you what they all are.
I know you had a whole pile of them, and there were so many. It was difficult to go through them all and see what they all were. But that seems to me quite an amazing thing for a winery that's been around such a short time. Is it unusual in this field?
You know, I'm not really sure. I don't know how to answer that. I don't really keep track of what the other wineries do. We enter them mainly as a little bit, you know, it's nice to have awards and stuff like that, but if we entered all the contests we could enter, I'm sure we'd have 10 times more awards, just because there are so many. But we really try and focus on the higher echelon ones. That the San Fran Chronicle is, I think, regarded within California as maybe the best, and then Cal State and Orange County. So those are the three that we focus on.
Okay, okay. And what about plans for the future? What are you going to be producing? Different wines? You said you're going to aim at growing somewhat more or producing more cases. What are your plans going into the future?
Just to grow incrementally, to bring on Cab Franc. I think we have one Chardonnay now. We want to bring on probably at least another white wine. Play around maybe a little more with some blends. That's been very popular. And I don't know, other than that, just develop the grounds and try and make it very friendly and that sort of thing. Okay.
Don't want to go into a huge amount of detail of it, but what about the business side of wine making? There's some industries that when you go into them and you ask, how do you make a small fortune in your industry? And they say, start with a large fortune. What's the winery industry like as far as business models are concerned?
It's a nightmare for the financial guys, because especially if you're focusing on red wines, there's a very long time delay between when you put money and labor and all your costs going in to where you start to see it come back. Lots of inventory. The good news is the inventory generally improves with age, but you have to pay for that storage, and so it's not an industry for the lighthearted or somebody who's trying to turn a buck quickly. You really need to have patience, and then, you know, it's a living thing, and Mother Nature is she can be a temperamental phenomenon, or woman, however. So there's a lot that can go wrong. I always try and think positive, but there certainly is plenty that can go wrong. So not for the faint of heart.
So talk about things that go wrong. What things keep you up at night going wrong?
Oh, wine is any home winemaker would know this, but when you make wine, it goes through phases. And so it can taste just fantastic 1 month, and a few weeks later, it tastes awful, really. And usually, big rule of thumb also in wine is don't panic. If something isn't too good, you know, obviously check the basics, but don't panic, wait a little while, try it again. And so, but when you do go out, there's nothing worse, really, than when you go out and you have maybe 10 barrels or a big investment going, and it's gone into one of these funks where it happens. That can make you very nervous, you know, and you send out for testing or whatever, but you know, fortunately, knock on wood, in my cases, I come back in a month, wow, it's even better than it was before. So it's kind of like a damping sine wave as it goes on through age, and then once you bottle, it goes through, or normally it goes through a bottle shock, which is another one that kind of, you know, put a few more gray hairs on you.
Okay.
But, which also is for me, I mean, being fairly new at this, I think I'm more reactive to it, and kind of being not a one-man show, but close to it. You know, the old guys, the guys who've been in the business forever, they don't worry about that stuff at all. So hopefully someday I'll be like that.
Okay. Would you have aspirations to go beyond the land that you have now into something larger, or do you think this is going to be it?
I think this is going to be it. You know, we have one child. He seems to be interested, and if we could keep this small and sustainable, like I say, if he wants to take over someday, that'd be tremendous. But that being said, who knows? You know?
Yeah, sure. Who
knows?
And you're no longer in the high tech world now, so that you're totally doing this and nothing but this.
It takes all my time.
I was going to ask you that, and it does take all your time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, are there any particular areas about the land or the wine itself that you think are going to continue to separate you from the crowd? You've already mentioned that you get these very robust, thick-skinned grapes. Is there anything else that can continue to separate you from them, from other people out there?
I think mostly, I mean, we're dedicated to continuing to improve the quality however we can. That's first priority, but we're also dedicated to having fun, and to having fun with the labels and the bottles and the experience. You know, wine, it's more than just the wine in the bottle. It really should be an experience. And
right. So you'd think you'd continue with the interesting comments on the labels rather than trying to become more serious and more like the French approach to it.
God, yes, that's a very high priority. So if that ever happens, then that means no, I don't. My wife especially is extremely dedicated to keeping this fun.
Right.
If it's not going to be fun, then we might as well focus on something else. So let's have fun and make good wine.
Okay, so we're getting close to having to wrap up now. Many more things I could ask you about, so thank you very much for coming on. Are there any particular words of wisdom you'd like to offer to entrepreneurs going into either the high-tech industry or the winery industry?
Well, I would just say from my experience, it was just kind of noticing what was there in front of you all along, that it was somehow, you know, things were aligning where if I didn't do this, I think I would have regretted it for my whole life. And so far, there's been certainly nights where I've regretted it, but overall, I'd do it again.
Terrific. Tom, thank you very much indeed for your time. Appreciate you coming along here.
Thank you.
And this is Chris Gill with the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur. Good to see you again, and hope to see you again next month. So.